How to play Twisted Fate Brawlers. A new build has been seeing more and more play, revolving around the buffs given to Twisted Fate. Twisted Fate Brawlers plays around contesting units like Kassadin that assassins try to go for and using mana gain to help units like Asol and Cho'Gath to carry you. This composition is well-rounded, having a carry both in the front line and the back line. Brawlers provide some resistance against physical compositions, and Asol can be used with dragons to handle magic damage comps. There's also the option to use Hex Tech alongside units like Vi to disable units that are dependent on items like Kennen. But first, I'd like to remind you to click on the link below and take a look at the updated ProGuides.com if you want to learn more about teamfight tactics. ProGuides will always have info on the newest patches, best builds, and strategies. There are all kinds of different resources from top players to help you guys become the best players that you can be. So be sure to check out ProGuides.com using the link in the description. Alright, let's get right back into the video. A small fact about Twisted Fate that makes this strategy more consistent is his ability, Pick a Card, has a higher chance to select a blue card over red and yellow. This significantly boosts the strength of Twisted Fate in the comp, since you're mostly using him for mana generation. So let's begin with how this composition works, starting with the early game. This build is dependent on your early game, so you only want to actively look for the units if you have any on-hit or attack speed items. Tier can be made into Static Shiv and Luden's Echo. Giant's Belt is important for Morrocrux. Recurve Bow is good for Rageblade. Otherwise, it can be awkward going this build having, for example, a lot of BF swords. Early game, the units you want to look for are Twisted Fate, Kassadin, Rek'Sai, and Blitzcrank, them being the most important units. These are the only units that are going to be in your ideal mid-game composition. There's also Lulu, Ahri, and Warwick to use for the early game as well. Kassadin providing Void Sorcerers, Twisted Fate providing mana, and Blitzcrank and Rek'Sai being the late-game brawlers to aim for. However, keep in mind that knights like Garen, Mordekaiser, Poppy, and Darius are better frontline than Warwick, Blitz, and Rek'Sai early. So if you roll early knights, it's better to skip Warwick entirely, but pick up Rek'Sai and Blitzcranks. Another option is running Pirates with Gangplank, Pike, and Graves to build up economy for the mid-game. Gangplank is a great unit to put items like Morrocrux on, then sell once you find Asol or Cho'Gath 2-star. During this time, you want to look for components on Carousel to build important items like Luden's Echo, Hush, and Static Shiv to build on your Twisted Fate. If you want to get a guaranteed first pick, you can look to use Pirates and Lose Streak. The Lose Streak can tank your health while subsequently giving you a lot of economy. It's also really powerful to pick up Spatulas as well, to deny any Void Assassin players from getting Yomus, and to help you get Yuumi, which is powerful on Cho'Gath. If you have the items, but your team composition is different than what you want due to you wanting to maintain a win streak, it's still possible to transition as long as you actively look for Cho'Gath, Rek'Sai, Kassadin, and Twisted Fate. As we start building our composition, we now move on to the mid-game. In the mid-game, your most important units are Asol and Cho'Gath. These units are critical due to how effectively they fit into your composition, and their carry potential in the mid and late game. Cho'Gath with Void is incredibly important when dealing with dragons and knights. He also can be used with Morrocrux as well as Asol, but it depends on who you 2-star first. Asol is an important unit as well simply because the mana gain from Twisted Fate lets him use his ability frequently. If you find a Cho'Gath and an early Spatula, Yuumi is always the go-to option for him. If you have good economy, Blitzcrank, Rek'Sai, and Twisted Fate are good units to try to 3-star. 3-star Blitzcrank with 3 sorcerers can burst a lot of units from 100 to 0. Rek'Sai 3-star is a fantastic tank, and with Void, she can deal a lot of burst damage as well. Twisted Fate is an obvious choice to go for 3-star since he's the main carry of the composition. Though it isn't mandatory since at 2-star he already gains 50 mana from his blue card and his total mana pool is 50. If you're struggling to find Cho'Gath and Vi, another option is Brand, Kennen, and Lissandra as a backup. Elemental Sorcerers can give you survivability mid-game, and items like Guardian Angel and Morrocrux that go on Kennen means if you do get 2 Cho or Asol, you can sell Kennen and put the items on them instead. Once you have an ideal composition, usually looking like 2-star Asol, Cho'Gath, Vi, Cass, Twisted Fate, Rek'Sai, and Blitzcrank, you can start aiming to look for late-game options. When looking at enemy teams, if you're against a lot of assassins, you can also use Kassadin, Ahri, or Lulu as a bait. While you do this, place your brawlers around Twisted Fate on the opposite side. It's also good to place a bait unit if you're dealing with Asol, who will usually aim for the furthest unit. Finally, it's time for us to review over the late game. In the late game, you want to look for a Jinx to give your team Hex Tech at level 8. If not, you can also look to find Shyvana or Pantheon to provide magic resistance with Asol if you're going against teams that deal a heavy amount of magic damage. If your Twisted Fate is stacked with mana and attack speed items, you can look to build carry items on Cho'Gath and Asol. If you manage to find Karthus 2-star, then he can be a great sorcerer to run late game as well. If you have Yuumi on Cho'Gath, you can also actively econ for level 9 and run 6 sorcerers. The 4 sorcerers obviously being Twisted Fate, Kassadin, Cho'Gath, and Asol. Units like Karthus, Lulu, and Morgana can fit the other sorcerer slots most effectively. Braum or Leona can also be an amazing pickup if you run Pantheon for Dragon, or if you're fighting Draven or Slingers. Blitzcrank grants your team a major advantage, especially if you're running Jinx. Always try to aim to look for their back line. If they use a bait unit, use it as a way to give Jinx a free kill. In a normal fight, he also usually can use his ability twice, which can disturb the enemy's backline greatly. Ideally, your late game composition can look like a few of these. For Hextech, Void, Brawlers, Sorcerers, and Dragon, you can go Asol, Pantheon, Twisted Fate, Cho'Gath, Vi, Blitzcrank, Rek'Sai, Kassadin, Jinx, Guardian. For 6 Sorcerers, Brawlers, and Void, you can run Asol, Cho'Gath with Yuumi, Twisted Fate, Kassadin, Rek'Sai, Blitzcrank, Vi, Karthus, and Lulu. Now that we've learned how to play this composition, how do you want to ideally itemize? Twisted Fate doesn't have a core build, but he works incredibly well with attack speed and mana items. Rageblade, Luden's Echo, Static Shiv, and Hush are all strong items on him. Seraph's Embrace is another option for Twisted Fate as well, but due to a bug with Twisted Fate not getting the 20 mana after he uses his ability, it can be quite inconsistent. Twisted Fate should also be a priority for these items. Since units like Asol might be good with more attack speed, playing around Twisted Fate's mana gain plays a big part in the composition's purpose. Cho'Gath ideally wants to aim for Yuumi, Morrocrux, and Guardian Angel. He can work pretty well with general AP items like Rabadon's Death Cap and Rageblade, since any AP buff directly increases his damage due to Void. Tank items like Dragon's Claw or Warmogs can be effective on him as well. Asol's items are Rageblade, Rabadon's, and Morrocrux. Morrocrux can either go on Cho'Gath or Asol, though it's dependent on who you 2-star first. Asol is good with leftover attack speed items as well, like Static Shiv or Rapid Fire Cannon. Blitzcrank is also a fantastic user for Zephyr, since if you place him in the very corner, it can knock up any bait units enemies try to position around. Now that we know how to play Twisted Fate Brawlers, how do we position with him? The team actively plays around Twisted Fate's mana card, so make sure wherever he's placed, he's giving mana to your core sorcerers and Cho'Gath. Ideally, surrounding him with units will give him the most mana, Brawlers obviously tanking in the front line and sorcerers in the back. Asol wants to be in the very corner ideally, allowing him to get the most effective ultimates. Cho'Gath, on the other hand, wants to try frontlining. However, it's best to put a brawler on each side of Cho to avoid focus fire from items like Hush and synergies like Glacial. You can be a bit more lenient with Cho'Gath's positioning if he has a Guardian Angel though. Though mentioned earlier, using a bait unit is always a fantastic option when playing Twisted Fate Brawlers to keep your Twisted Fate from dying. Units like Kassadin, who are core units but scale very poorly as the game goes on, can serve as an effective bait. However, Kassadin can also still be effective at mana-draining units like Gnar or Kennen, who you typically don't want to ultimate. Blitzcrank applies a lot of pressure to the backline and can easily change many fights. Always try to look for the most optimal positioning for Blitzcrank. Units like Jinx and Kassadin can also stand next to Blitzcrank as well, Kassadin providing mana burn in case he pulls a unit like Asol, and Jinx gaining attack speed for assisting in a kill. Only downside to Blitzcrank is if Twisted Fate focuses a gold card on a unit Blitz pulls rather than an important frontline unit like Sejuani. If you find yourself up against a Twisted Fate Brawler composition, what team do you aim for to counter them? Shapeshifters are probably the biggest counter to Twisted Fate Brawlers for multiple reasons, specifically the Gnar, Asol, and Shyvana trio. These units are generally difficult to kill, and the Twisted Fate comp doesn't have the DPS to handle them effectively. Even though you can have Cho'Gath with Void handle the dragons, it still isn't enough damage typically to kill them. Your main sorcerers, Asol and Twisted Fate, may also see difficulty dealing damage because of the dragon synergy as well. Dragon Claws and Hush are the 2 best items to counter this composition when against them. Hush on a high attack speed unit like Ashe or a slinger like Lucian to disable mana gain on the Cho'Gath can be incredibly crucial to a fight. Dragon Claws can also prevent your backline like Draven from getting caught out by Asol. Speaking of Draven, if you're running any hyper carries like Ashe, Draven, or Lucian, always be mindful of where their Blitzcrank is positioned. In general positioning, you want to space your units out to avoid dying to Cho'Gath. Putting your carries on the same corner as the enemy Asol is effective also, since Asol typically targets the furthest unit away. If you're running assassins, try to get your carry assassins on the opposite corner of the Twisted Fate and play around any potential bait as best as possible. Twisted Fate Brawlers can be a great countercomp to fighting assassins or knights. It's relatively tanky units, and Twisted Fate's mana gain makes it a consistent, well-rounded comp. Towards the late game, it leaves a lot of room to adapt. Brawlers and Twisted Fate being uncontested can make this team easy to build as well. It's not too difficult of a comp and gives clear direction and units to aim for. Its simplicity gives many options to adapt in and out of the comp. We hope you guys enjoyed this guide on how to play Twisted Fate Brawlers. Was there anything we missed? What do you think is the best items on Twisted Fate? Comment down below, and remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit ProGuides.com to stay up to date on teamfight tactics. We wish you guys the best of luck in your next games, and we'll see y'all next time.